In the year 1177, one of the greatest cities on earth was burning. Angkor, capital of the Khmer Empire, the most powerful kingdom in all of Southeast Asia, had just fallen. Its king was dead. Its temples were being looted. And its people had no one left to protect them. Somewhere in the chaos, a Khmer prince watched his homeland fall apart. He had the blood of kings in his veins. He had the skill of a warrior. He had the wisdom of a man who had spent decades waiting, watching, and preparing. His name was Jayavarman. And his moment had finally come. But to understand why this moment mattered, we need to go back. Back to the beginning of a life that reads less like history and more like legend. A life defined not by quick victories, but by one of the longest waits for power in the history of the ancient world. Jayavarman was born around the year 1120, a prince of the Khmer royal family in the great city of Angkor. Angkor was extraordinary. At a time when most of Europe was stumbling through the Dark Ages, Angkor was a city of 1 million people, with running water, paved roads, and temples that touched the clouds. As a young prince, Jayavarman was educated in both warfare and Buddhist philosophy. He learned to lead armies. He learned to read Sanskrit inscriptions. He studied the ideas of compassion and duty that would one day define his reign. But the throne was not his to take. Not yet. When his father died in 1160, Jayavarman was in his 40s. A cousin took the throne instead. Then another usurper overthrew that cousin. The palace at Angkor was drowning in betrayal and bloodshed. Jayavarman, sensing he could not win a civil war alone, made a decision that would change everything. He left. He crossed into the neighboring kingdom of Kampa, the powerful maritime empire that occupied what is now central Vietnam. Nobody knows exactly why he went there. Some historians believe he was forced into exile. Others believe he went willingly, to study military strategy and wait for the right time to return. While in Kampa, Jayavarman did not fade into obscurity. He fought battles. He formed alliances. He married a remarkable woman named Jayavarman, a deeply religious Buddhist scholar who became his closest advisor and the greatest influence on his future reign. Together, they waited. Years passed. Then a decade. Then 2 decades. Back in Angkor, kings rose and fell like seasons. The empire weakened. Corruption spread. The magnificent water management system that fed the entire kingdom began to deteriorate. Angkor was slowly rotting from within. Then came the year 1166. A palace official murdered the king and seized the throne for himself. The new usurper called himself Tribhuvanadityavarman. Jayavarman raced back from Kampa to challenge him. He arrived at Angkor. But he was too late. The usurper had already consolidated power. Jayavarman retreated. And waited again. For the next 10 years, Jayavarman lived in the shadows of his own kingdom. He was in his 50s now, an age when most Khmer kings were already dead. He had no throne. He had no army. He had spent decades watching other men rule the empire that should have been his. Most men would have given up. Jayavarman did not. Then, in 1177, everything changed. The Cham king Jayavarman IV launched the most audacious military attack in Southeast Asian history. He sailed an entire war fleet up the Mekong River, across the vast Tunnel Sap Lake, and up the Siem Reap River directly into the heart of the Khmer capital. The attack was a complete surprise. Angkor had never been invaded by sea before. The Khmer king Tribhuvanadityavarman was killed within hours. The wooden city burned. The golden treasures of the temples were looted. And the great Khmer Empire, which had ruled Southeast Asia for 3 centuries, was occupied by a foreign power for the first time in its history. When news of the fall of Angkor reached Jayavarman, something shifted in him. This was not just a political opportunity. This was a calling. His kingdom, his people, the temples his ancestors had spent centuries building, all of it was in the hands of foreign invaders. He began to move. Jayavarman was in his late 50s. He had no permanent army, no treasury, and no palace. What he had was a lifetime of military experience, a network of alliances built over decades, and an iron belief that he was the rightful king of the Khmer people. He began recruiting warriors from every province. For 4 years, Jayavarman fought a guerrilla campaign against the Cham occupiers. He struck from the jungle. He disrupted their supply lines. He liberated village after village. Slowly, painfully, he was pushing the invaders back. Then came the moment that would define his legacy forever. In 1181, Jayavarman launched a massive naval counterattack on the Tunnel Sap Lake, the very same lake the Khams had used to invade 4 years earlier. Hundreds of Khmer war boats faced the Cham fleet in the largest battle ever fought on Cambodian water. The outcome of this battle would decide who ruled the entire empire. Jayavarman won. The Cham fleet was destroyed. The invaders retreated. Angkor was free. And Jayavarman, finally, at the age of 61, was crowned king of the Khmer Empire. He had waited more than 30 years for this moment. He had been patient when other men would have broken. Now his time had come. What happened next shocked even his own people. Most kings who take power after a long struggle spend their reign securing that power, punishing enemies, and enriching themselves. Jayavarman did the opposite. He looked at a kingdom broken by decades of civil war and foreign occupation, and he decided to heal it. His first act was not to build a palace for himself. It was to build hospitals. Within years of taking the throne, Jayavarman had constructed 102 hospitals across the entire empire, staffed with doctors, herbalists, and attendants. Every single person in the kingdom, from nobles to farmers, could receive free medical care. He then built an empire-wide road system with 121 rest houses placed every 15 kilometers along the highways, so that travelers, merchants, and pilgrims would never be stranded in the jungle. For the first time in Khmer history, an ordinary person could walk from one end of the empire to the other in safety and comfort. Then he turned his attention to his greatest project. He would build a new capital city. Not just a city, but the physical representation of the universe itself, carved in stone, larger and more magnificent than anything ever built in Southeast Asia. He called it Angkor Thom. The Great City. At the center of Angkor Thom, Jayavarman built the Bayon Temple. It was like nothing ever built before. 54 towers rose from the stone, and on every tower, 4 giant stone faces gazed out in every direction. Calm, mysterious, all-seeing faces. Historians still debate whose face they represent, the Buddha, or Jayavarman himself. He built Ta Prohm Temple to honor his mother, and Priya Khan Temple to honor his father. One inscription from his reign reads, "He suffered from the illnesses of his subjects more than from his own." The pain that affected men's bodies was for him a spiritual pain, and thus more piercing. These were not just words. They were a philosophy of kingship. Under Jayavarman VII, the Khmer Empire reached its greatest territorial extent ever. His armies pushed north into Laos, south to the Malay Peninsula, and west into Burma and Thailand. An empire that had nearly collapsed under foreign occupation was now the most powerful kingdom in the history of Southeast Asia. Jayavarman ruled for nearly 40 years, finally dying around the year 1218 at the extraordinary age of 93. He had outlived enemies, usurpers, and even the empire's greatest crisis. The man who had waited patiently in the shadows for decades had gone on to build the most magnificent civilization his people had ever known. Today, the temples Jayavarman VII built still stand in Cambodia. Every year, millions of people walk through the stone faces of the Bayon and feel something they cannot quite explain. They are standing inside the vision of a man who waited 50 years to be king, and then spent every day of his reign trying to make life better for the people he served. The greatest lesson of Jayavarman VII is not about power. It is about patience. It is about a man who never gave up on his purpose, even when the world gave him every reason to. He waited. He endured. And when his moment came, he did not waste it. He used it to build something that would last forever.